Yeah, and if you can't find any weight, what you might want to do is find someone like Sam. You can go ahead and strap them to the front row bar. Then you don't need to worry about it. It'll hold that front end down.
But on a serious note,
welcome to Sam's Garage, presented by NH Oil Undercoating. This week's episode, Sam and Kevin Ford mock up the body wiring harness in the Jeep TJ Rock Crawler. Then Sam and Doug Harris upgrade the brakes in the Alpha 1 GTO project. Next, Sam starts on the top end of the LS3 engine by installing new cylinder heads. And with the heads installed, Sam gets to work on the valve train components. This week, we installed the accessory wiring harness in the Jeep Rock Crawler.
we got our interior pretty much buttoned up. We got the wires run. We did not terminate the rear because we have no idea what we're going to do there yet.
Right, and there's plenty of length. I mean, we had to wind it up. You know, you only wanted to go so far with taping it and looming it.
Absolutely. And we did loom the one section going to the back, and we did take everything up through the dash. There is going to be some items that we have to lengthen to get to the ignition switch and or the wiper switch, because we went to the passenger side of the vehicle, which these are designed to go to the driver's side of the vehicle.
Yeah, and that's not a problem. We'll just do good connections with, you know,
absolutely,
heat shrink and everything like
Extend
that.
what we need and cut off what we don't need. And in the kit, you're going to see this power wire for the alternator, but these older cars, the classic cars, run about 60 amps current through the alternator, and that's going to be plenty through this little wire. But these newer cars, if you guys are doing an LS swap in your modern car and you have a high amp alternator, 110 to 160, you're going to want to run a much bigger gauge wire for the alternator and fuse it.
Let's get this trail rocker system in. It's a lot of the same steps, but it's a pretty cool deal. We'll get it run. Same thing, just mock up. We're not terminating anything.
Sounds good. Now, when we're going to be wiring any vehicle up, you want to make sure to go around anything that may be in the way. In this case, I've got wires going to the left of this roll bar, and then I want to make sure that my tail section wire goes to the right of the roll bar, because this section is going to go up into the dash. This section is going to go in the back. I'm not going to loom this until I'm all done. I've got loom, but I want to make sure I route everything. My lengths are good. I'm going to take tape and tape every 12 inches, keeping these wires bundled together nice and tight. That way my loom will look good when I go over it. If you use zip ties, you're gonna see the heads of the zip ties and it'll get in the way of the loom. You don't want that. All we gotta do is take, these are all our power wires, we're gonna go to our components, then we're gonna ground each component where it sits on good metal. What's very convenient about this is that each leg has been bundled together so that you know exactly where it goes. Like for instance, I got a headlight switch, I've got my ignition switch. Each leg goes to a component, which makes it easier for you. You just make sure that you loom it at the end once you've terminated at the component. What makes this a little more simple, like I said, it's just time consuming, not very hard. But as you can see right there, it is completely illustrated where this wire goes every 12 inches. Every 12 inches. So if you terminate it somewhere, you'll know exactly where that wire goes, because you can just go back and read where it goes. Every single wire in the entire system is labeled like that. That wasn't too bad, wasn't it, Kevin?
No.
Got it all completed?
No, the bracket Matt made was perfect. It just gets in there, it gets that trail rocker right next to the battery, down low so we can get the lid off, we can get to all our fuses and all our relays.
And having 8 circuits in that trail rock, we counted 5.
Yeah.
That gives us 3 extra to do whatever we want with.
Yeah, that's going to be great. The switch panel inside, you know, obviously we don't know exactly where we want it, so it's awesome they put it in that housing.
Yep.
And it's got, you know, a tab on it. When we're ready, we can just mount it and go.
Yeah, because you want that at arm's reach, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So you don't know where the seat's gonna sit yet, so we're not gonna bolt that into the Jeep yet until we're finalized in that part.
Yeah, so I'm excited to have that, get something else going.
And you know, the trail rock comes with all the circuits that we need to go into the front. It comes with terminated pinned end to make a connector to go inside to that switch panel.
Yeah, that was nice. The lead coming from out here to inside was long enough that I don't even think we're going to need the long lead that was inside, and it's already got the sheeting on it. So.
And now, anytime you guys are wiring up your custom ride, make sure to take the time, do it right, because if you don't do it right, there's a very good chance you're going to burn that car down or Jeep down in our case.
Right.
So take your time, do it right.
Yep, and it's all fused, so we should be safe.
Absolutely.
Welcome back to Sam's Garage, presented by NH Oil Undercoating. Sam and Doug Harris upgrade the brakes in the Alpha 1 GTO project.
So today we're going to be doing probably the most important aspect of any build, and that's going to be the stopping power of your vehicle. We're going to be tripling the horsepower on this car, changing the weight bias on it. So as you can see, this is the front rotor. It's not even vented. Look at this rotor, Doug.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. You can see absolutely how it's vented, and it's also got these holes. They're not drilled all the way through, they just go part way through. One of the problems with when you totally drill all the way through here, when you're braking real hard, these can get cherry red, and then you can start getting stress cracks. I've actually had one of these explode on me when I was driving a race car. Makes it really difficult going into a turn when you have no brakes.
Very dangerous. But look, they're also 2 inches larger in diameter. 4 piston calipers we're going to be installing. It's going to give us a lot of braking power. Now, anytime you guys are working on your vehicle, a lot of people may not know left and right depending on how often they work on cars. So a good idea to index left to right parts is to put a D for driver and a P for passenger. That way you always know which side of the vehicle those parts go on. Now, we've already disassembled the brakes when we put the suspension on.
Yep.
All we got to do now is mock up this, because anytime you put an aftermarket brakes on, there may be some shimming involved. Let's go ahead and start marking it up. I got new bearings coming. Let's finalize this.
Let's get going.
So anytime you guys are putting big brakes on, there's going to be some wheel fitment issues. In our case, this is an old school car. We have very expensive Dayton wire wheels, and they're very close to the wheel wood caliper. What I did was I used 3 shims or washers behind the knockoff hub to make sure how much room I need for that wheel to clear that caliper. Then I'm going to measure that, buy me an aluminum spacer, and complete the job. And always remember to wipe off any grease or oil from the rotor using brake cleaner so that you don't contaminate your brake parts. All right, Doug, that looks pretty good. It's going to stop well too. It took a little bit of mocking, but it fit really well at the end.
Yeah, you know, once again, it's real important that you mock everything up, because there was a lot of little adjustments we needed to make. So if you start out, you're hard bolting everything, you're putting it on, taking it off, just put everything loose, you know, just kind of loosely put it up, mock it all up, and then once you're satisfied with it, then tighten her down.
Even though it's going to the body shop, you got to be able to have parking brakes, and you got to be able to stop the car in case they have to push it around the lot. Now tell them about the strap and why we have to use this.
Yeah, one of the things with the strap, it's real important, you know, with this car right here, as we're going through it, we've got the motor out on it, we've got everything on the lift, we took the front end off, car became real tail heavy. And so it's important that you strap it down. If you don't strap it down, you risk, as you lift it up, that back's heavy, you could accidentally bump it, it comes right off the lift, somebody could get hurt or even killed.
Absolutely, and you know, we sat there and we rocked this on the lift before we took all the components off. The wheels, the brakes, the control arms, adds a lot of weight to the front. So when we took all that stuff off, we didn't even think about it being back heavy.
Right.
So that was close. Take a strap, wrap it around one of the legs, find a point on the car, and strap it down, holding it to the lift so you don't have any issues. Now what we're gonna do is go to the rear, install the rear brakes, after that the master cylinder, and then we can bleed it up.
Oh yeah, no, the whole setup looks great. The suspension on it, the brakes, great job.
Absolutely. Check it out, guys. We're here in the facility where they actually spray the product at NHOU, and we're gonna be talking about the Boss Wax on this application. And that's pretty much the wax that gets hardened, correct?
Yeah, it gets semi-hard. It is a one-time standalone application, so this is for new vehicles only. What we'll do is, now this vehicle is going to be treated with oil. So the wax is actually going to go on. It's going to be a black, completely cured, dry to the touch. It doesn't attract dirt and dust type of a product that will stay on there for the life of the vehicle. And we offer a nationwide lifetime warranty on this. Now that's on the wax barrier. We're not going to say that you're not going to have rust, but we'll maintain the wax barrier, and if you do that, you're going to have very minimal rust.
There you go. If you guys have a new vehicle out there, make sure to check out NHOU Boss Wax for your application and lifetime protection.
Sam's Garage, presented by NH Oil Undercoating. Next, Sam starts on the top end of the LS3 engine by installing new cylinder heads. Then with the heads installed, Sam gets to work on the valve train components.
This week we're going to continue building our LS3 engine, and we are at the process where we're going to be installing the cylinder heads. Now I went with Brodix because ever since 1965 they have been the leader in cylinder head technology, cylinder blocks, and intake manifolds. I went with the BR3 LS3 heads. Now these heads are CNC ported on the intake side. They've cleaned up the bowls. It allows you to run all the factory LS3 valve train components, as in the valves, the springs, retainers, seats, and seals. Now in my case I went with the Livernois Motorsports camshaft, so I have to go with an upgraded valve train as far as the springs, retainers, and locks go. Now these BR3 Brodix heads are made of soft aluminum. That way, in case you guys destroy a piston or you kill a cylinder chamber, you can very easily send it off to Brodix and they can repair it for you, or you can have your local machine shop repair it for you. Now these cylinder heads are designed with a 15-degree angle, and you're probably wondering why. Well, when Brodix flows their heads and they're developing their cylinder heads, they use the dry flow and the wet flow numbers to determine where they're going to be placing their valves. And with a 15-degree setup, they've realized that the wet flow, which is the most important part of it, is a more direct shot into the cylinder. And that's going to give you better atomization, and it's going to keep the fuel from sticking onto the runners, starving the engine of fuel. Let's go ahead and install our ARP studs and put on our heads. Now that our heads are fully assembled, they're ready to go onto the engine block. Now as you can see, I did not use lapping compound because when you do, over time, the compound itself will beat the seat up. So I lap it dry. And then if you don't have a vacuum tester or any way of checking the holes, you can always pour water down the intake and exhaust, or even turn it upside down and pour it onto the combustion chamber, making sure you have a spark plug in there, and that'll tell you whether you have a leak or not. As you see, I tapped the end of the valve on final assembly. The reason why I did that is because if those locks were not in place, they would have fell out right here on the bench and not in the car. The worst thing you can do is drop a valve, because that'll pretty much grenade your engine. Because the engine is out of the car, I can install my studs now and assemble everything. Usually when you're doing this job in the car, because you need room to put the heads on and off, you want to put the heads on, put the gasket on, put the studs in one at a time, put your washers on, and go ahead and tighten everything down. Now my engine block has been fully cleaned by the machine shop, but if you guys are doing a head gasket in the car, you want to make sure that you blow out all the holes that the head studs or bolts go into, because a lot of times when you pull the head off, the coolant will flow into those holes, and if you forget that, it'll cause a huge problem. You can either crack the block or you won't get proper torque, causing another head gasket issue. Man, there is nothing like topping off your engine build with a nice set of aluminum cylinder heads. These BR3 heads from Brodix are really going to do the job for me. That 15-angle valve job is going to make sure that the fuel does not stick on the runners or the backs of the valves. It's going to shoot right into the cylinder, creating more power due to the better atomization. Now, as you guys can see, I got 4 holes here that are pretty much opened up, and that's because these heads are designed to work with both an LSX block and a standard LS3 block. The good thing is that when ARP made their stud kit, they created one part number for both engines. So those guys who are using LSXs are going to have the hardware in it, and for those of you who are not, you're going to have a little bit of extra hardware. Make sure that you lube both sides of the washer, the bottom of the nut, and the threads when installing all your hardware. That's going to create low friction, giving you a proper torque spec. It's very important. Then you want to go through and make sure you wipe off any residue. What's in the cylinder head is going to go down into the oil. Make sure that you change your oil at 500 miles, getting all that assembly lube and any contaminants that may be in the crankcase and the building process out of the motor, going in with nice fresh engine oil. We almost got ourselves a long block, a couple more steps, and we're going to be there.
Welcome back to Sam's Garage, presented by NH Oil Undercoating. To finish things off, Sam installed new cylinder heads and the valve train assembly in the LS3 engine.
Okay, so we've gotten to one of the most intricate parts of the engine build, and that is addressing the valve train. Now, we have done a couple of changes on this motor, and the most important thing you have to consider is going to be your push rod length. The factory comes with a 7.38. Most times when we don't change anything and all we do is a camshaft upgrade, we go to a hardened 7.4, okay? Let's say your valve train is off a little bit and you either have a too tight of a push rod or too loose of a push rod. You want to get yourself one of these push rod measuring tools, okay? As you can see, it unscrews. It varies from one spec to another. And what you want to do is you put this in the hole, making sure that you're on the base circle of the camshaft. That way, you'll put it in the hole, put the rocker arm in place. You want to lengthen this rod until you got all the free play out of the rocker arm. Then you pull out the push rod and you add one full turn, which is going to give you 50 thousandths preload on the lifter. Very important till you take this step, because you either have a noisy valve train or it'll be too tight and it'll kill the lifters. Now, a lot of you guys in the aftermarket world will upgrade the trunnions inside your factory rockers. There are needle bearings in here, and a lot of times we'll find these needle bearings in the oil pan. In my case, I'm not going to get overzealous on my timing, and I use 93 octane gas. So as long as I keep spark knock down to a minimal and I don't get overzealous on the timing, these guys are going to live. I've used them many times in the past. All right, so here we have a long block. We've got the valve train assembled. Everything is pretty much tightened and ready to go. Before we put our intake manifold on, ARP makes a lot of hardware chromoly for strength on the internal portions of the engine. But I don't know if you guys knew this, but they also have complete engine accessory kits that comes with almost every bolt you need for your application. This is an LS kit. Comes with all the stainless steel bolts for the outside of the engine. It's gonna make it look really good. And this is somewhere where you really don't need strength, but they're plenty strong. In this kit comes with every bolt you need for your LS engine, as far as the intake manifold goes, the valve covers, even the coil packs and their brackets onto the valve cover. It comes with the exhaust manifold bolts. And let me tell you guys something. If you don't change anything else on your LS engine, you want to address those exhaust manifold bolts. Anywhere from a 5.3 all the way to a 7.0, those things, because of the cycles of expansion, they tend to break. So before you have one break off, get yourself a set of ARP exhaust manifold bolts and go ahead and change them one at a time. That will give you peace of mind and strength, making sure that you guys don't spend a whole bunch of money on a head job removal just because of a couple broken bolts. Now, I'm using an aftermarket intake manifold, so I went ahead and got a couple more bolts for the intake manifold itself. Before I put it on, make sure that you guys, because we have rubber O-rings on the bottom of the intake manifold, you want to be able to have that intake manifold slide without the rubber gaskets coming out of their spots. So we're going to take a little bit of grease and we're just going to put it right around the runners. That's going to give us a nice slick surface where if we have to move that intake manifold, it's going to be able to move no problem without damaging those intake gaskets. Now, with the engine on the engine stand, you can very easily just set the intake manifold right on top and not really have to move it. But if you're doing this in a car, especially an F-body Camaro, half the engine is underneath the cowl. So you're gonna have to slide the intake manifold in place. And if you go do that without any grease, the gasket will roll on itself, come out, and cause a big problem. Man, this engine looks really good. Not only does it look good with all those ARP bolts on it, but it's gonna stay together, and it's gonna really perform well with those Brodix BR3 heads on it.
Thanks for tuning in. This week we installed the body harness in the Project Jeep TJ Rock Crawler. Then the Alpha 1 GTO received a new set of front brakes with 4-piston calipers. To finish things off, Sam installed new cylinder heads and the valve train assembly in the LS3 engine.